Greetings, adventurers, and welcome to Skill Tree. I'm here to save you. Dramatically, with fireworks and movie lighting and everything. Okay, well, I'm here to show you how I saved myself with this thing called perfectionism. From that moment where the thing that you're making doesn't really match the thing in your head anymore and you think you messed up. Or maybe you don't suffer from crippling anxiety when it comes to crafting, but you still could use some more techniques around making your project look awesome. Both work. Today we're talking about weathering, something that generally is actually really easy to do and can be frustrating with how much better it makes things look with so little effort. I know, you've heard the word weathering, so have I. But I didn't really understand. By the way, I have the hammer because I need something to fiddle with. It's my hammer of truth. We don't have glasses here yet for me to do the typical, like, drink in hand thing. I didn't understand what weathering does to the process of creating something as a whole, rather than it just kind of being an extra step at the end. We had a project recently that I had to hand paint and weather a lot. And when you're doing it that much, you begin to kind of realize the power behind it. And genuinely, it completely changed my relationship with crafting. I will warn you, it can be frustrating how well it works, because you put so much effort into a thing and then you wipe a dirty washcloth across it and suddenly it's 10 times better and it can be frustrating. But to use any tool to its full potential, you have to understand the why of it. I think both Clever and me have a sort of teaching philosophy that is, we want to teach you the why of things rather than just how we do stuff. That way you can do it in your own way because you understand the mechanics. So let's talk about the mechanics. Hello, it's Editing Maddie. And Emmy, because he wouldn't stop screaming unless he was here. I have spent the last couple of weeks working on this video, and it has become much bigger than originally intended. This was the first time that I was left alone with our new office and all of the toys, and so I think I made 3 videos by accident. I've been working on this episode for a few weeks, which I didn't realize until I went to edit this video, and it was 4 hours long. So there's gonna be some parts where it sounds like I talk about other stuff that had to be cut out. But I'm hoping to use those parts as their own videos in the future. We have a link to our Discord in the description, where I have a conversation going with the community about what they would want to see with that kind of footage. So I apologize for the choppiness. Making videos is its own skill I'm leveling up. There is one specific thing that doesn't get an explanation, but I mention it. Later on, I use a spray bottle with alcohol pigment. It's basically these little stamp pads that are used antique paper. I found out they were alcohol-based, so I just put them in a spray bottle full of alcohol and used them to weather stuff. All right, I'm gonna finish up this video so I can finally have it done. First, what do I actually mean when I say weathering? People can have different definitions for words, and it's very useful for us to understand what we're actually talking about. When I say weathering, I mean taking an object and making it look like it has kind of lived in the world. Making it look used, exposed, lived in, shaped by time, whatever poetic way you want to put it. We are adding visual history. Basically, anything that lives in the world has been touched by it. This hammer, for example, has been touched by it a lot. It's got stains on it, the edges are all messed up. We'll get to the different types of weathering. So next big question, why do we do it? Or more importantly, why does it work? Why does it make things look better? I don't have fake glasses, but if I did, this is where I'd put them on, because I'm gonna talk about psychology. Unless you are an alien or a squirrel that's gained sentience, we all know it's coming. We are human. And our brains are pattern recognition machines that like the world around us to make sense. And mostly our brains got what makes sense from the natural world. Industry and all that's relatively new. It'll take a while for it to catch up with that. And perfection doesn't exist in the natural world. At least not in the way that manufacturing and industry and stuff can make it nowadays. Or that you can make it when you are the manufacturer. Even something that is made perfectly doesn't stay that way for long as soon as the world is in contact with it. Go touch that brand new thing you just got and see how fast perfection breaks down under those greasy little fingers. We are pattern recognition machines. And perfection breaks the pattern. We do so much leather craft on this channel, and almost every single step of leather crafting is either to add durability or to add visual depth and make it look used, AKA weathering. So let's talk about visual background noise. Sounds weird, I know. But as you will learn if you watch more videos with me, I love analogies. It helps me blend my brain to you. Perfection's flat. It's boring. Even on a subconscious level. If you see something that is flat and perfect, your eyes skim right past it. There's nothing for your brain to chew on. I'm gonna use the analogy of sound since it's a little bit easier for people to understand sensory engagement. So let's say you have a completely silent room. If you stay there long enough, maybe even the thought of it while you're listening to this video will kind of trigger the same process. Most people will subconsciously start to make noise to make the room or the environment feel less empty. Humming, tapping, sighing. It doesn't necessarily have to be restlessness. A lot of times it's just a hungry brain looking for stimulation in a starving room. Our brains hate lack of stimulation. But what about a room that has gentle background noise? Nothing big enough to demand your attention all by itself, but something that makes the environment feel real, like it has depth, like it's something that feels lived in. Silence is weird to a brain the same way that visual perfection is. Okay, so we've psychoanalyzed our need for pattern and sensory engagement. Now let's move a little higher up the brainstem. We like stories. We like context. We like looking at a thing and filling in what we think happened to it, even if it's mostly subconscious. A thing with a story is much more interesting to us innately than a thing without one. Kit wanted me to tell the dog statue story. But honestly, there isn't just one. Basically, if there is a dog in statue form and it is within our power to pet it, we will. Enough that when you look it up, you'll see statues that the heads or noses of dogs are all shiny and new, or the dog on a statue that there are other things like people. The dog looks new. It's just because of all the constant polishing that we keep giving it from all of the pets. That's a pretty drastic example, but a lot of people will see that and they'll like those statues or the art that they're attached to more just because there's a story for their brain to kind of chew on, to attach to empathize with. It tells a story. Beyond the actual story the statue itself is telling, I mean, you know what I mean. It sticks in our brains and we like the whole art piece better. Even if, technically, that's not the way that the statue was intended to look. We can dress it up in whatever words and processes and conceptualization we like, but in the end, it boils down to make this part look different enough from this part that we're adding visual depth through contrast. We want visual contrast, specifically following the logic of natural weathering, because it tricks our brain into thinking something is real and fits in the world, even if you just made it that day. It doesn't even have to be super realistic. Look at theater props. As long as it fits the pattern, your brain doesn't really know the difference. It's like putting sugar-free sweetener into a dessert. Your brain doesn't really know the difference, it's just tasty. Another analogy for you. A good way to think about it is sliding scales and making sure that you're not just paying attention to only one. So like highs versus lows, clean versus dirty, warm versus cool colors, matte versus reflective finish, faded versus rich colors, smooth versus rough texture, exposed versus protected. It's not just dark colors versus light colors. You have more sliders than that. You have saturation, you have finish, you have texture, you have color temperature. Okay, we are through with the philosophical kind of concepts behind weathering and why it works, so let me take off my psychology glasses. Thank you for sticking around if you did. Now let's talk about how you actually weather something. First of all, ground rules. Yes, the hammer is back. Weathering is not simply making something look older. It doesn't have to be old. The real goal is making it look real. Heart of the world, used, touched, befitting of the pattern. Weathering is adding history, not visual noise. Let's go back to my fun analogy about sound. We did the silent room, now let's do a room that's just full of noise. Not necessarily loud noise, but just a bunch of it. All different types, not related to each other. Overlapping everywhere. You can pay attention to any one of them, but they're all there and they don't necessarily connect to each other. They're just there. I think that I would rather have the silent room. That isn't to give you like a new form of perfectionism where you're constantly trying to find the perfect level of weathering. It's more to say that weathering works better when it follows an internal logic. And also, a little goes a long way. You don't have to do a lot. Your brain is happy with humming or tapping in a quiet room. It can be as simple as that. Okay, so how do we take all of the different noise and make it fit together? Well, look around. Everything around you is weathered because it's there and you've used it. You've put your human hand oils on them. You've cleaned them. They've been rubbing against things. They've bumped into things. You've dropped them. They might have been sun bleached, water damaged, dyed, straight up were damaged and repaired. And every material acts differently. fabric frays, leather creases and cracks, wood dents and grays, paint chips, metal scratches and oxidizes. But this video would be really long if I went over just every type of weathering there is and how materials react to different things. And it gets kind of overwhelming if you digest it all at once. So I'm gonna try and lay out some pre-digested patterns that I've noticed in the world that you can apply to pretty much everything. And when you are working with a specific material, reference photos are a huge help. Just look it up, see how that material would actually react and what you're trying to make it look like. Reference photos are slept on too much. All right, so my little weathering cheat codes. It's basically like, are you adding or taking away? We'll start with taking away. So taking away, kind of broken down into exposure, wear, and damage. It's the same kind of process, just different ways that it's done to the object. Exposure is exposure to the elements. It tends to be more of an overall effect. You leave something outside and it just kind of generally looks older. We established earlier that the natural world does not like perfection. The natural world also doesn't like most of the things we make, and it will try to take them back, piece by piece. When something is exposed to the elements, it tends to break down. Normally, this shows as a loss of saturation in color. It strips the vibrancy of whatever was used to color the object away. It can also tend to lower the brightness. So it tends to get a little bit lighter, and it can get a little bit grayer. Examples being like sun-bleached things, like sun-bleached clothing, or a water-stained table. The next kind of taking away is wear. Wear is specifically more friction. This could be something like the slow thinning of the fabric between your pant legs as they rub together when you walk, or how the edges of things sometimes get rounder and lighter in color over time because that's where all the impact and friction is being caught. I mean, even this desk that we got for the office, it's a used desk that we're planning to refurbish. Right in front of me, the wood is lighter because that's where a person's arm has always been moving. That's wear. Damage is more specific because that's where the exposure gets much more targeted. Because water stains and such can fall in. Water stains are weird. None of these are like a clean-cut category, like water stains can also fall into damage. It's more just ways to help you conceptualize what you're doing to a thing. Damage is where exposure gets even more targeted, and sometimes extreme. Not using a cutting board and accidentally cutting into your table is damage. It is technically exposure to that blade. Okay, we talked about taking. Now let's talk about giving. For this, I broke it into collection, enrichment, and repair. Collection is kind of like exposure, but the opposite. If exposure is what the environment takes away just by existing in it, then collection is what you kind of pick up along the way with the environment. It's the slow, steady pickup of oils and dirts and materials and just all of it that might be caught in the cracks and crevices of an object. It's why things tend to look better when the edges are shaded darker or when it's darker in the cracks, is because those are the areas that exposure and wear have trouble reaching. So all of that collected oils and dirts and stuff don't get rubbed away, forming a natural gradient. Where taking, we tended to lower the saturation and up the brightness because it's damaging the color. Giving tends to lower the brightness and up the saturation, or at very least protect the saturation that's there. It can also add an entirely new tone if it's something like dirt being added to it. It does this mostly just because when things collect, they protect the thing from exposure, leaving the thing underneath it relatively darker and more saturated than everything that didn't get protected. Okay, then there's enrichment. In the same way that wear is specifically friction, enrichment tends to be specifically oils. The kind of natural oils that exist in our world that get caught in the cracks and crevices and do what we just said. They protect the color and the saturation and everything. But because they're kind of clear, they mostly enrich the color that they're on rather than like dirt building up in a crack. And repair, like damage, is the one that kind of breaks the rules of the category. It can have the most extreme examples of something being added where, say, you sand away damage and add new dye to a table. Typically, like, that part of the table will always be slightly different because that spot didn't get the Now let's work through the last material, wood. I saved this for last because it honestly shows off a lot of the concepts all combined together really well. Well enough that if you're thinking about getting into weathering, it might be the best place to start. Considering what I'm gonna be using, a basket me and Kit got from a thrift store a while ago, and 2 chests that I got from Michael's. I'm also gonna use this hammer that we made in a previous video. You know, so we can test the actual emotional risk of going back and weathering something when you've already put a lot of effort into making it. So I busted out the Michael's chest that I had just badly stained a dark brown, and I started sanding it. And it's amazing how quickly just sanding it in the places that I thought there might be some wear and tear immediately makes it look so much better. I've really started getting into woodcraft, I think. It's been a thing that I've been looking into recently, and my first immediate thought when I started sanding it was, oh, such a beautiful wood grain, which I think means that I'm a woodcrafter now. That was the one that I had pre-colored. But since I liked the sanding effect to a colored piece so much, you don't really get that if there isn't a color to sand off, I decided to go over the other pieces with some sort of base color. For the small chest, even though I got really poor footage of it, I used the purple leather dye as a test. For the basket, I decided to go more for like a natural look, but it's been worn and used. So I used my little alcohol spray so that it looks like stains and kind of like a natural tint and darkening. And then for the hammer, I use this butcher block oil and stain. It enriches the color that's already there and also adds a bit of deepening to it. While those were drying, I went back to the original chest and rubbed the whole thing in Pro Resist. I went in with some leather antiquing. I used a dark brown on the chest, really working it in to all the different crevices and stuff. I kind of treated it like I did the acrylic, where I went in with a wet cloth and wiped it away where I didn't want it. So, you know, techniques are all coming together. It's all coming together. I did the same process to the small chest and the hammer. Because it's a purple that has like a reddish undertone, I first went in with a mahogany. And while it's not as dark as the dark brown, it should bridge the undertones of the brown and the reddish undertones enough that when I do put the dark brown on after, it doesn't look out of place. And you know, we're going for depth, so more depth isn't gonna hurt anything. For the basket, I took the darker brown of those two alcohol pigment pads and made its own little spray bottle so that I could use that to try and shade it a bit. That way the shading looks more staining and less like I've sanded off parts of it. Just a different vibe to that one. Then once I was happy with that, I went in with the Pro Resist and added antiquing to the basket as well. I used the antiquing paste for most of it because it was thicker and got more into the crevices. And also gave kind of like a dirt feel to it where it had a little bit of a grain to it and filled in some of the cracks enough that it looks like stuff like oiled material has been built up in it. And then after that was dry, I went in with an antiquing gel of dark brown, just to make sure that I got everything that the paste wouldn't have got into. After I was done with the antiquing and everything, I had done the darker parts, so I went in with sandpaper to everything and made sure to sand down the areas where wear would lighten the color, especially the edges of things. For the chest and such where I had already sanded it, I resanded some parts of it to make sure that my antiquing and stuff hadn't darkened anywhere that I wanted to stay particularly light. Then I started a process of putting on the polyacrylic in layers, waiting for it to dry, and if it had darkened any of my highlights, I resanded those parts and applied another layer. And there we have it. Honestly, I have never worked with wood before. Not really. And I did all of this myself. Kit was busy. So I had no idea what I was doing, and yet I still made all of these things look pretty amazing. And besides the drying times of stuff, this took maybe a few hours, while also doing the rest of the wooden bits. Honestly, since I've been working on this project, I walk through stores and I just see all of the different kind of, even just like cheap stuff that I know, like a layer of acrylic paint on some random plastic ornament could make it look old and beautiful and metal. But like, look at how gorgeous this turned out. It's amazing. Like, it's been a long time of me watching Kit do stuff. And it feels really good to take a project that he did and be able to add my own part to it, I guess. Like, you can't tell me that doesn't look better. And its own story is being highlighted. Like, there's little divots where it's been damaged, where he probably smacked it against something like a hammer is wont to do, that I made sure I got some of the antiquing in them so that they stand out. Because that's what normal wood would do. It would collect things in the crevices. This is honestly a super fun experiment of just going through different things and trying to make them look more real. It taught me a lot about how to work with all of these different materials and how I like things to look and how to get to that point. And it also made me a lot more relaxed of trying to make sure things didn't come out perfectly. Because everything has a story. And there were a few projects recently, from the project that can't be named, but hopefully we can show off soon once it's out in the world and we won't be spoiling it. But there were parts I spent a literal day hand painting to have perfect lines on them. And then I dragged a dirty, wet cloth across the edges, and it was so immediately better that it was frustrating. Like, I'm happy, it looks amazing, but like, I spent an entire day making those perfect. And no amount of the perfect I did to it made it look as good as when I messed it up. I hope that gives some people a little bit of an easier time getting into crafting. That it is genuinely fun to work with kind of scraps and to play with different materials and see what they do without worrying about what the end result is. And also, when you are making a thing that is a full project, just because you make a mistake, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is a mistake. Bob Ross had it right. Like, it is an opportunity to have a relationship with the project, for it to tell you something about what it wants to become, and for it to be more real and more unique and more yours. It takes a lot of the pressure off when you know that every little dent and mark technically can make it better and can be inspiration for what you do next, and that no amount of perfect straight lines, painstakingly painted, will ever outmatch a dirty wet rag. You've made it to the end screen. YouTube loves it when you do, and it's a fantastic way to support this channel. Another fantastic way to support this channel is to join these people's noble ranks. These people are our patrons. And even when we are busy and vanishing into the ether of project making, they have supported us for years and are one of the main reasons that we've reached this point. And then I can even be here, in person, finally, and making videos too. So from the bottom of our hearts, genuinely thank you. And once we get things a little bit more settled here, there are things coming as a thank you for the patrons. The Patreon is not the only way you can support our channel. Even just sharing the videos or clicking on these videos. If you liked my style or want to check out the kinds of stuff Kit does, click these videos here. I hope to see you again in the future, perhaps weathered by time and the elements. But that only means that you'll have a lot to tell me of all the stories you've collected along the way. Speaking of, I've got some stories to go make. We got a lot in the works, and I can't wait to share it with you.